Observe the white sedan as it turns into the driveway at 847 Pinewood Terrace. The time is 3:17 p.m. on a crisp Tuesday afternoon in October. The neighborhood is deceptively calm, the autumn leaves painting the street in shades of orange and crimson. A man emerges from the vehicle middle-aged, nondescript in his khaki pants and a polo shirt. He moves toward the front door with a distinct sense of purpose. He produces a key, unlocks the door, and disappears inside. This man is Gregory Hamlin. He is 42 years old, a systems analyst for a medical supply firm, a husband of 16 years, and the father of 2 adolescent daughters. His own home is a mere 3 miles away, in an entirely different subdivision. This house is not his. In less than 2 hours, this very home would become the scene of a forced entry by emergency responders, and the chilling discovery within its walls would ignite the most extensive human trafficking investigation in the state's history. The date: Tuesday, October 12th, 2021. The first indication of trouble surfaced at 4:53 p.m. A 911 call was placed by a neighbor, Patricia Sinclair, who reported agonizing screams emanating from 847 Pinewood Terrace. The residence belonged to a 78-year-old widow, Dorothy Vance, a woman who lived a solitary life. While Mrs. Sinclair knew Dorothy was private, she also believed her to be in stable health. The screaming, which had persisted for several minutes, was profoundly disturbing. The sounds were described as desperate, primal screams of terror. Paramedics were the first to arrive on the scene, swiftly followed by a pair of patrol officers. Their knocks on the door went unanswered. They announced their presence, but the screaming had ceased. An unsettling silence had fallen over the house. Citing clear evidence of distress, Officer Ryan Blackwell made the call to breach the entrance, a standard procedure for welfare checks of this nature. The front door gave way, splintering under the second blow. Inside, in the living room, they located Dorothy Vance. She was conscious, yet visibly disoriented, seated in her recliner with a blanket draped over her lap. The intrusion of law enforcement seemed to confuse her entirely. When questioned about the screams, she could offer no explanation. She repeatedly insisted she was fine and urged them to leave, but something felt profoundly wrong. Paramedic Lena Kowalik observed the slight tremor in Dorothy's hands and a subtle slur in her speech, potential indicators of a minor stroke. An immediate medical evaluation was deemed necessary. Dorothy offered weak protests, but ultimately relented and agreed to be transported. Officer Blackwell inquired if anyone else was present in the home. Dorothy's answer was firm. No, she lived alone. She always had. Despite her assurances, Blackwell conducted a sweep of the premises as per standard procedure. It was a modest home, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. The first bedroom was unmistakably Dorothy's, marked by a floral bedspread, prescription bottles on the nightstand, and a stack of large print mystery novels. The second bedroom served as a storage space, cluttered with cardboard boxes, aging furniture, and an old sewing machine. On the surface, everything appeared ordinary. But then, Officer Blackwell detected it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound originating from behind the closet in the storage room. It was a soft thud, followed by another, the unmistakable noise of a body bumping against a wall. He moved to the closet and pulled the door open. Inside was nothing more than hanging coats and plastic storage bins. Yet the sound persisted, emanating from somewhere beyond the closet's rear wall. The closet's interior measured 3 feet deep, but Blackwell, recalling the room's exterior dimensions, knew it should have been closer to 6 feet deep. There had to be a false wall. He ran his hand along the edges until his fingers found a seam. Applying pressure, he pushed. A panel gave way, swinging inward. The space it revealed was small and windowless. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating a mattress on the floor, a bucket in the corner, and a young woman sitting on the mattress. She appeared to be in her early 20s, emaciated, and dressed in simple sweatpants and a t-shirt. Her wrists were raw and inflamed. She remained silent. Her gaze was fixed on him, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended words. Officer Blackwell immediately radioed for backup. Her name was Isabel Navarro. She was 19 years old and had been classified as a missing person for 7 months. Isabel had vanished from a bus stop in Columbus, Ohio on March 24, 2021. She had been on her way home from a routine shift at a retail store. The last known image of her was from security footage, Isabel, waiting at the stop. Then, a white sedan pulled to the curb. A man leaned out from the window. Isabel approached the car. She got in. The vehicle drove away. From that moment until this discovery, Isabel Navarro had effectively ceased to exist. Detectives were on the scene within the hour. The case was assigned to Detective Mara Vincent, a 17-year veteran with a deep background in major crimes. She had investigated trafficking rings before, but this case was an anomaly. This was unfolding inside a residential home in a middle-class suburb. This was, by all appearances, someone's grandmother's house. Dorothy Vance, meanwhile, remained at the hospital undergoing a full evaluation. Interviewing her was a priority, but Detective Vincent's first move was to meticulously process the scene itself. The hidden chamber measured approximately 4 feet by 8 feet. The only ventilation was a narrow gap beneath the false wall. The mattress on the floor was heavily stained. Lined against one wall were plastic water bottles, a paper bag containing protein bars, and a flashlight. There was no phone, no television, no means of communication with the outside world. Isabel would later tell detectives that she believed she had been confined to that room for months, though she couldn't be sure of the exact duration. Without natural light or a clock, all sense of time had eroded. Her only marker was the arrival of a man who brought her food and water every few days. On occasion, he would provide clean clothes. He never uttered a single word to her. His process was mechanical: unlock the panel, slide the items inside, and secure the lock once more. She had no idea what his name was. In all that time, she had only laid eyes on him twice. The first was the day of her abduction at the bus stop. The second, when he violently relocated her from another location to this very house. On both occasions, his face was concealed behind a surgical mask. Model, but the vehicle. That, she could recall. It was an older model white sedan, scarred by a conspicuous dent in its rear bumper. Vincent then pressed Isabel about the screams. Isabel was adamant they were not hers. She too had heard them, the terrified cries of an older woman echoing from somewhere else within the house. Earlier that day, she had overheard a heated argument, a conflict between a man's voice and a woman's. Then, the screaming had begun. An overwhelming terror had seized Isabel. She was convinced the man was about to murder whoever was out there with him. A short time later, she heard the sounds of doors opening, the arrival of multiple people, their voices carrying an official, authoritative tone. It was then she began making noise, desperate that someone might discover her. And someone did. From that point, the investigation moved with blistering speed. Forensic teams descended upon the hidden room, beginning their methodical work. They uncovered a wealth of evidence: fingerprints, samples of hair, and trace fibers. The flashlight yielded a serial number, a crucial link that could be traced back to a point of purchase. Even the water bottles were a clue, a specific brand distributed exclusively by a regional grocery store chain. Every minute detail was now of monumental importance. At the hospital, detectives conducted their interview with Dorothy Vance. She was now lucid. A minor stroke was confirmed, but its effects were not severe. She was profoundly frightened and disoriented. She swore she had no knowledge of any young woman being held captive inside her home. Vincent found her credible. Dorothy's financial situation was precarious. She subsisted on a fixed income from Social Security, supplemented by a small pension from her late husband's career as a teacher. 6 months prior, a man had approached her in a grocery store. He was polite, his appearance neat and unassuming. He claimed he was in need of storage space and presented an offer, $500 a month, in cash, for the use of her spare bedroom. There would be no lease, no questions asked, only cash. The money was a lifeline, so Dorothy had consented. He furnished her with a key for a padlock he had personally installed on the storage room door. He had explained that he was merely storing business inventory, assuring her it was nothing illicit, just items that required a secure space. His visits were infrequent, once or twice a week, typically while she was either napping or occupied with television. He moved quietly, never once causing a disturbance. She had never peered inside the locked room. Until that day, she had never detected anything out of the ordinary. He had arrived earlier than his usual time, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he seemed uncharacteristically agitated. Dorothy had inquired if everything was all right. His reaction was sharp and aggressive. He snapped at her to mind her own business. A wave of fear washed over her. As she began to tell him she was no longer comfortable with the arrangement, he seized her arm with bruising force, ordering her to be silent. He then disappeared into the storage room. It was then she heard them muffled sounds coming from behind the door, the sounds of movement, of someone crying. A horrifying realization began to dawn on her. She began to scream. In the chaos, he fled through the back door, moving with calculated haste. She heard the engine of his car ignite in the driveway. By the time she managed to get to the window, he had vanished. Dorothy provided the detectives with his description: a white male in his 40s, of average height, with dark hair and glasses. He drove a white sedan with a noticeable dent in the rear bumper. She had never learned his name. The white sedan was the critical lead they needed. Traffic cameras positioned near Dorothy Vance's residence had captured the vehicle exiting the neighborhood at 4:39 in the afternoon. A portion of the license plate was legible. The DMV database flagged 17 potential matches within the region. detectives began the arduous task of working through the list. The fourth name they came to was Gregory Hamlin. Hamlin resided in a subdivision just 12 minutes from Pinewood Terrace. He was 42, married with 2 children, and held down a full-time job. His record was clean, no criminal history, no red flags, but he was the registered owner of a 2013 Honda Accord, white, with body damage to its rear bumper stemming from a minor accident 3 years before. Investigators moved to obtain a warrant. They executed it at 11:47 that same evening. Gregory Hamlin answered the door dressed in pajama pants and a t-shirt. His confusion appeared entirely authentic. His wife, Brenda, stood just behind him, her expression one of equal bewilderment. Upstairs, their daughters were asleep. Hamlin denied everything. He claimed he had never been to Pinewood Terrace. The name Dorothy Vance meant nothing to him. He had never heard of Isabel Navarro. But then, investigators presented the traffic camera footage, his car, his license plate, captured as it turned off Dorothy's street. The color drained from Hamlin's face. He fell silent. He requested a lawyer. The subsequent search of Hamlin's residence would last for 6 hours. Concealed in the garage, detectives discovered padlocks identical to the one found at Dorothy's house. Inside his car's trunk, they found zip ties, duct tape, a taser, and a heavy canvas tarp. In his home office sat a locked filing cabinet. Within that cabinet, they found a laptop computer. It took the digital forensics team 2 days to breach the password. What they uncovered was a reality far darker than anyone had imagined. The laptop was a ledger of horrors, containing spreadsheets with names, dates, and locations. Photographs of young women, some taken candidly on the street, others from identification documents. And email accounts established under false identities, filled with encrypted messages that coordinated transportation and payment. It became terrifyingly clear that Gregory Hamlin was not acting alone. The digital records pointed to at least 4 other individuals, all part of a sophisticated operation with distinct roles and responsibilities. One operative was tasked with recruitment, while another managed the complex logistics of the network. A third individual was responsible for providing secondary locations. Hamlin's position within this hierarchy appeared to be that of middle management, a facilitator who transported victims and maintained the temporary holding sites. The scope of the network was staggering. It had been active for a minimum of 3 years. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was brought in. Special Agent Nora Cassidy of the Human Trafficking Task Force was assigned. For 8 years, Cassidy's entire career had been dedicated to dismantling networks exactly like this one. In her career, she had witnessed criminal enterprises of every caliber, but this was of a different order entirely. Its organization was chillingly professional. They utilized unassuming residential homes, not isolated warehouses or commercial buildings, and they enforced a strict compartmentalization of every role. The documentation was meticulously kept. Within the laptop lay the names of 7 other young women who had vanished. Each had disappeared over the preceding 3 years, plucked from different cities across Ohio and its neighboring states, all of them between the ages of 18 and 24. Of all the names on the list, Isabel Navarro was the only one who had ever surfaced. A dedicated task force promptly established a command center. They began the painstaking work of tracking the individuals identified in the computer's logs, cross-referencing their names against a sea of rental agreements, utility bills, and vehicle registrations, slowly constructing a map of potential locations where the women were being held. Gregory Hamlin remained a stone wall. Even after his own lawyer detailed the mountain of evidence, he was silent. Even when prosecutors offered a plea for his cooperation, Hamlin said absolutely nothing. His wife, Brenda, was completely shattered. She had no idea, not a clue. To her, he was a man who worked a normal job, came home each evening, and coached their daughter's soccer team. There had never been any warning signs, no unexplained late nights, no behavior that raised her suspicion, and no mysterious influx of money. The entire life she thought she knew had been an elaborate fiction. The investigation's first true break would come from another direction entirely. One of the encrypted email accounts on Hamlin's laptop was registered to a user known only by the initials J, C. Forensic analysts began to trace the account's login history, discovering that the vast majority of logins originated from an IP address assigned to a business in Toledo. It was a logistics company called Meridian Freight Solutions. On paper, the firm was completely legitimate, managing supply chains for various regional manufacturers. But someone inside was using the company's computers to access the clandestine account. His name was Justin Carver, age 38, a warehouse supervisor. He had been with Meridian for 6 years. He had no criminal record. He was married, with no children. Federal agents arrested him on November 3, 2021. A search of Carver's home produced yet more evidence. They found another laptop, more spreadsheets filled with more names, and a series of text messages between Carver and an untraceable number, coordinating pickups and holding arrangements. It took less than 8 hours of interrogation for Carver to completely collapse. He confirmed the entire structure of the network, a core of 5 members, with operations spanning 4 states. They preyed on vulnerable young women runaways, those with fractured family relationships, the desperate souls searching for work or a safe place to live. The predators would wear many masks, posing as potential employers, landlords, or simply kind strangers. Once a woman was isolated, she was transported to a temporary holding facility, a waypoint before being moved again to the final buyers. It was a cold, systematic, and efficient machine. It was a monstrous operation. Carver gave them everything: names, locations, and crucial timelines. The task force mobilized immediately. From November 8th through November 12th, 2021, the operation went live. Over a relentless 5-day period, federal agents executed 14 synchronized raids across Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Michigan. They recovered 6 more victims. All were alive, found in similar nightmarish conditions: hidden rooms inside ordinary houses, barren storage units, and a converted shed behind an isolated farmhouse. None of the rescued women had any idea where they were. None had ever seen the faces of their captors. All of them had been controlled with the same terrifying threat: if they made a sound or tried to escape, their families would be murdered. The youngest was 17, the oldest 23. One of them was Isabel's friend, Monica Velis. She had been taken from the same bus stop just 2 weeks after Isabel. The same white sedan, the same insidious pattern. The network's leader was finally identified as a 51-year-old man named Elliot Marsh. He had run a series of logistics companies across 3 states, all of which were elaborate, legitimate fronts for his human trafficking operation. He was arrested at his quiet home in suburban Cleveland. His lawyer immediately began to negotiate. By November 20th, all 5 core members were in federal custody: Gregory Hamlin, Justin Carver, Elliot Marsh, and the final 2 members, Dennis Kohler and Angela Pritchett. Kohler's role had been managing recruitment. Pritchett had handled the operation's finances and clandestine communications. The full investigation revealed the network had trafficked a minimum of 23 women in just 3 years. 7 victims remained missing. Authorities believed they had been sold to buyers in other states or possibly moved out of the country. As the legal proceedings began, the search for them continued. Elliot Marsh was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison on an array of charges that included human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy. There would be no possibility of parole. Gregory Hamlin received 38 years, Justin Carver, 32 years, Dennis Kohler, 29 years. Angela Pritchett, for her extensive cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 18 years. All 5 were ordered to pay restitution to their victims, though none possessed assets sufficient to meet the judgment. The trials lasted for 8 agonizing months. The testimony was profoundly difficult. Many of the survivors opted not to testify in person, providing their harrowing accounts through recorded depositions instead. 3 women, including Isabel Navarro, found the courage to appear in court. Isabel's testimony took 40 minutes. She calmly described the bus stop, the white sedan, and the disorienting months she spent lost in darkness. When asked how she survived, she replied that she counted her own heartbeats to mark the passing of time. She explained how she recited every poem she had ever memorized in high school, and how she thought about her mother every single day. For 6 hours, the jury wrestled with the evidence behind closed doors. When they finally emerged, their decision was unanimous and absolute: guilty on all counts. In the disorienting aftermath, Isabel Navarro retreated to the shelter of her family in Columbus. The verdict was a victory, but the cost was staggering. Her job, her home, and 7 months of her life had been erased. The nights brought panic attacks and the days were sleepless. She sought refuge in therapy, slowly and deliberately beginning the painstaking process of rebuilding her shattered world. She found a new purpose, enrolling in community college. Her chosen field was social work. Her mission was to dedicate her life to helping other survivors navigate the same darkness she had endured. Monica found the memories too suffocating to remain in Ohio. Seeking anonymity and a new beginning, she moved to Arizona to live with relatives, hoping the distance would muffle the echoes of the past. She and Isabel maintain a fragile connection through infrequent messages, 2 souls bound by a shared trauma, each attempting to find their own path forward. Although Dorothy Vance recovered from the physical trauma of her stroke, the psychological damage was permanent. She sold her house, unable to endure another moment within its walls. The knowledge of the evil that had transpired under her roof, just beyond her awareness, became a ghost that haunted her every waking thought. She sought solace in a senior living facility, confessing to friends that she finally felt a sense of security being surrounded by others. The remaining victims scattered like ashes in the wind, seeking refuge in different states and entirely new lives. A few stepped into the media glare, determined to use their ordeal to raise public awareness. Others retreated into profound privacy, shielding themselves from the world. But each of them, in their own way, shouldered the immense weight of what had been stolen from them. Brenda Hanlon severed all ties to her former life, divorcing Gregory and reclaiming her own surname. She vanished with her daughters into the anonymity of another state, choosing to never speak publicly about the nightmare she had lived. Her daughters are now in therapy, struggling to reconcile the two irreconcilable images of their father, the man they loved and the monster he truly was. The case sent shockwaves through the legislature, precipitating significant systemic changes. The state of Ohio responded by passing the Safe Harbor Act in 2022. This new law drastically increased the penalties for human trafficking and mandated specialized training for all emergency responders to recognize the subtle, often hidden, signs of these situations. The legislation also established a state-funded task force, a unit dedicated solely to the complex work of dismantling trafficking networks. At the federal level, the FBI expanded its regional human trafficking units. A new era of intensified coordination between local police departments and federal agencies was born from the tragedy. Several survivors, with Isabel among them, bravely collaborated with lawmakers to help shape the legislation, testifying before stoic committees. They laid bare their most painful memories, offering their stories as a shield in the hope that others might be protected from a similar fate. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children implemented new protocols, revolutionizing how they identify trafficking patterns within missing persons reports. It became standard procedure to cross-reference disappearances, analyzing the methods, locations, and demographics of the victims to uncover hidden connections. While no single measure can prevent every case, the hope is that it will prevent some. Today, the hidden room at 847 Pinewood Terrace is nothing more than a memory. The house itself was razed in 2023. The plot of land now sits vacant, a scar on the suburban landscape. Isabel Navarro achieved a milestone, graduating with her associate's degree in May of 2024. She is now focused on earning her bachelor's. On rare occasions, she speaks at trafficking awareness events, carefully selecting her engagements. She fiercely guards her private life now, a privacy she has more than earned. The 7 other women, the ones who were never found, remain specters. Their cases are still active. Their families are still suspended in an agony of waiting. The white sedan, a key instrument in the horror, was destroyed as per evidence disposal protocols. But countless others just like it still glide down quiet roads, through residential neighborhoods, pausing at bus stops anywhere. And that is the chilling, lasting truth of this case. The network was a cancer that thrived in plain sight, hidden within suburban homes, legitimate businesses, and the faces of ordinary-looking people. No one ever suspected a thing. No one knew, not until a single neighbor heard a scream and made a call to 911. Sometimes, that is the only thing required. One person who hears, one person who calls, one person who chooses to act. Officer Ryan Blackwell is still with the department. He admits that his thoughts often drift back to that day, to the faint, desperate sound behind the wall, and to the chilling question of what might have happened if he hadn't heard it. If he hadn't bothered to look, he remains profoundly grateful that he did, and so does Isabel Navarro. It begins with an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Autumn leaves, a quiet suburb, a white sedan pulling into a driveway. No one suspects a thing. That is exactly how evil survives, not in shadowy alleyways or abandoned warehouses, but in houses that look just like yours, behind false walls and spare bedrooms, in plain sight, hidden in plain life. Isabel Navarro was 19 years old when she was stolen from a bus stop on her way home from work. For 7 months, she counted her own heartbeats to mark the passing of time. She recited poems in the dark. She thought of her mother every single day because hope was the only light she had. She survived, but 7 others weren't found in time. Human traffickers don't look like monsters. They look like neighbors, co-workers, and coaches. They wear ordinary faces. They live ordinary lives. And they prey on the vulnerable, the young, the lonely, the desperate with chilling, calculated patience. Here is what saved Isabel. One neighbor heard a scream and made a call. That is the lesson. That is everything. If something feels wrong, speak up, call, act. The difference between silence and one phone call can be the difference between a life lost and a life reclaimed. Isabel is now studying social work, turning her darkest chapter into a beacon for others. She chose to let her pain build something. So can you. See something. Say something. Be the person who makes the call.